Big brother. Their auras seem to be all in the nine heavens realm. The big black wolf transmitted its voice. Nonsense. Who else can enter the test if they are not in the nine heavens realm? Only the two of us are the exception. Qin Feiyang thought. One of the old men came back to his senses and looked at the two people and the beast with a smile. The three of you, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Qin Feiyang and the big black wolf replied. But the young man only glanced at the seven of them indifferently and yawned, looking sleepy. The seven of them did not say anything. Facing Long Chong and the messenger of the dragons, this person had such an attitude, let alone them. While they were talking, the hurricane had already surged over. It covered the sky and covered the earth, and there was no way to avoid it. The destructive power of these hurricanes is not very strong. I'll go and destroy them. One of the middle-aged men smiled proudly and stepped out, blocking in front of the hurricane. Divine power surged and turned into a wave of anger that blasted toward the hurricane. Qin Feiyang looked at the middle-aged man's back. This person's cultivation was half a step into the nine heavens realm, so it would not be a problem for him to destroy the hurricane. However, when he glanced at the young man beside him, he found the young man's eyes were filled with a hint of mockery. This caused Qin Feiyang to be taken aback. Why was he looking at him like that at a time like this? Could it be? Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something and quickly looked at the middle-aged man again. The hurricane arrived and clashed with the middle-aged man's divine power. However, right before they met, the power of the hurricane suddenly soared by a large margin. The middle-aged man's divine power dissipated on the spot, unable to withstand a single blow. How is this possible? The middle-aged man's expression stiffened. The six people standing behind Qin Feiyang were also stupefied. They were filled with disbelief. The hurricane's power could be increased? Fall back. Suddenly, one of the women yelled at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man shuddered and collected his thoughts. He immediately saw the hurricanes coming at him like terrifying beasts with their bloody mouths wide open, revealing their sharp fangs. In an instant, the hurricane drowned the middle-aged man. Cries of agony could be heard in the hurricane. Save him! The woman yelled. The six of them immediately released their divine power and attacked the hurricane together. Among the six of them, 4 were at the half-step ninth heaven state, and 2 were at the early stage ninth heaven state. This lineup was quite terrifying. However, the 6 of them couldn't defeat the hurricane and could only watch as the middle-aged man was torn to pieces by the hurricane. So terrifying? The big black wolf's eyes trembled. Qin Feiyang was also shocked. Chapter 24:17. Big Black Wolf looked at the backs of the 6 and asked doubtfully, Big brother, are they being kind too? Indeed, they are too kind. Qin Feiyang mumbled. They are just afraid that they won't be able to pass the trial and will die here. So they are trying to curry favor with us. What's there to be suspicious about? The young man said. If we're talking about curry favor, it's you. It has nothing to do with us. Qin Feiyang smiled. Big Black Wolf added, We're just basking in your glory. It's the same thing. The young man said lazily. Qin Feiyang shook his head with a smile and asked, Then, did you notice a detail? What detail? The young man was startled and looked at him suspiciously. They are too close. In fact, they entered the trial together earlier. Qin Feiyang said. Maybe they already know each other? Is there a problem? The young man asked doubtfully. If they really know each other, there's no problem. But I was on the plains at the time, so I noticed them. After all, they are the few nine heavens realm cultivators who came to participate in the trial this time. Of course I had to pay extra attention. They came from different places. Besides, they haven't spoken to each other since the beginning. This means that they don't know each other. But why are they so close to each other as soon as they arrived at the trial? They didn't even introduce themselves to each other? Qin Feiyang muttered. Now that you mention it, it does seem a little strange. The young man mumbled thoughtfully. We've all been through the same thing, so we know how the world works. For example, when 2 strangers meet, the first thing they have to do is to introduce themselves. It can't be that both of them are so close. Qin Feiyang said. Maybe they already knew each other before they entered the trial. After all, we came in first. I wonder if they did the same thing. The young man said. Even so, it's impossible for them to become so close in such a short period of time. Because no matter who it is, they would be wary of someone they just met who is not weaker than them. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The young man thought about it carefully and nodded. That makes sense. If that's the case, these people might be harboring ill intentions towards us? I'm not sure about that. But there's one thing I'm sure of. There's definitely something fishy going on. Qin Feiyang smiled. The young man was stunned and asked curiously, where does your confidence come from? Experience and feelings. Qin Feiyang said. All these years, what kind of scene and what kind of people had he not seen? Sometimes, one only needed to observe the body language to find clues. What about us? This is also the first time we've met. Are you also wary of this young master? The young man asked. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, there are some things that you should know in your heart. There's no need to expose them. Li Changhe was stunned and turned to look at the old man with a trace of suspicion in his eyes. However, this suspicion soon disappeared and he looked at the old man. Little brother, I'm asking you. Asking me? The old man was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, may I know your name, senior? The old man said, Wang Daoyuan. This person seemed to be a man of few words. After speaking, he continued to scan the glacier with vigilance in his eyes. Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Daoyuan deeply. This person was one of the two initial Nine Heavens realm. He looked at the other four people. These four people were two men and two women. They all looked middle-aged, and their cultivation was at the half Nine Heavens realm. Li Changhe also asked them to introduce themselves. The two men were called Shenrong and Zhang Yuan. The two women were called Zhou Dan and Xieqiu. Qin Feiyang said suspiciously. You all are from different places, right? Yes. They nodded. Then you all have a good relationship. Those who don't know would think that you all have been good friends for many years. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Hearing those words, the expressions of the crowd turned somewhat unnatural. But soon, this was covered up. Although we are from different places, our goal is the same, to enter the Dragon God Palace. And there are only a few of us in this examination ground. Of course we have to unite. Li Changhe said with a smile. Qin Feiyang nodded. It didn't sound suspicious at all. However, he had clearly noticed the unnaturalness of the few people who had appeared earlier. This matter was definitely not that simple. Qin Feiyang didn't expose them and asked curiously. Then may I ask seniors, why do you want to enter the Dragon God Palace? They were a little hesitant. Seniors, don't worry. I hate gossiping the most. Qin Feiyang said. Anyway, the dragons aren't here. There's nothing to hide. Actually, people like us enter the Dragon God Palace for nothing more than resources. Li Changhe. I see. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood and asked suspiciously. Then why don't you join the Dragon Slayer Palace? The Dragon Slayer Palace should have resources too. Li Changhe and the others' expressions changed and hurriedly said, Little brother, you can't talk nonsense. I know. In front of the dragons, I definitely don't dare to mention the Dragon Slayer Palace. Qin Feiyang said, if there's a chance to enter the Dragon Slayer Palace, it's of course a good thing for us. But the Dragon Slayer Palace has always been mysterious. Even if you want to join, there's no way, unless they take the initiative to come to you. Let's talk about it later. The Dragon Slayer Palace is just a new force. No matter what, it can't compare to the dragons. In the end, ordinary people like us really don't care who rules the divine land. As long as they can give us resources and give us a stable life, it's fine. Li Changhe. Qin Feiyang nodded. He believed that Li Changhe's words were also the thoughts of many people. Rule by the dragons? Rule by humans? In fact, it was almost the same. The only difference was their attitude towards the world. For example, if humans ruled the divine land and the ancient world, if they were crueler than the dragons, then they might as well continue to let the dragons rule. Whether it was humans or dire beasts, most of them just wanted to live a stable life. Of course, those with wild ambitions naturally had to be treated differently. However, Qin Feiyang always firmly believed that the ancestors were not such people. Because whether it was the Great Qin, the Forgotten Continent, or the ancient world. The ancestors were all for the sake of the world. This was a great man worthy of admiration, and was also a great man worthy of others to follow. Woo-woo. Suddenly, the storm struck again. Li Changhe and the other 5 immediately took the lead and rushed toward the storm. The big black wolf asked through voice transmission, "Big brother, is there a problem? Don't you already have the answer in your heart? Why are you still asking me?" Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes at it. "If I don't ask you, how can I show that you're smart?" The big black wolf chuckled. Qin Feiyong's face darkened, and he really wanted to kick it. "Let's get down to business. If these people are really up to no good, then shouldn't we strike first to gain the upper hand?" The big black wolf asked secretly, a trace of killing intent flashing in its eyes. "Are you stupid? Where are you going to find free fighters like them?" Qin Feiyong said through voice transmission. The big black wolf said, "I'm just afraid that they'll stab us in the back when we're not paying attention. As long as we're on guard against them at all times, it's not a big problem. Let them continue to help us open the way. Don't you think it's good now? We don't need to do anything." Qin Feiyong smiled faintly. The big black wolf also laughed sinisterly. In terms of bad, no one in this world could be worse than this guy in front of him. Looking at Big Black Wolf's smiling face, they could not help but feel their scalps tingling, as if they were being stared at by a weasel. Half an hour later, the group encountered another legendary divine artifact. It was a snake-shaped sword, its entire body glowing with a faint light, looking quite ferocious. After Shenrong's death, Li Changhe and the other 4 had completely dispelled the idea of snatching it. In the end, it fell into the hands of Qin Feiyong. Although the legendary divine artifact was not of much value to Qin Feiyong, one had to know that the entire Black Tortoise world was now crying for food. Therefore, now no matter what level of divine artifact it was, even if it was only a low-grade divine artifact, he wanted it. It was the same for everything else. For example, divine arts, medicinal herbs, pill fire, pill furnace, crystal vein, spirit vein, and so on. In short, as long as it was beneficial to the Black Tortoise world, whether it was good or bad, he would take it all. Another 4 hours had passed. They encountered another 3 divine artifacts. 2 peak-level divine artifacts, 1 supreme-level divine artifact. Although it was not comparable to a legendary divine artifact, it was better than nothing. It was also at this moment, a large outline appeared in front of them. From afar, it looked like a majestic mountain ridge. The group of people flew over without stopping. Snore. As they got closer, they suddenly heard a faint snoring sound. What's going on? Li Changhe and the others looked at each other. Was he hallucinating? Why would there be snoring in this place? Qin Feiyong and the big black wolf were also surprised. If there was a snoring sound, it meant that there was a living being. But along the way, other than the waves of storms that were stronger than the last, they did not see a single living being. Be careful, Wang Daoyuan said in a deep voice, his eyes full of vigilance. Qin Feiyong glanced at him. After interacting with him along the way, he had already understood a thing or two about this Wang Daoyuan. Although this person was taciturn, he was an extremely shrewd and cautious person. As long as there was the slightest movement, he would immediately enter a state of alert. Snore. The closer they got, the louder the snoring sound. In the end, the snoring sound was as deafening as thunder. But looking ahead, there was only a majestic ice mountain range and nothing else. The snoring sound seems to be coming from that snow mountain range. Li Changhe observed carefully for a while and frowned. Now, line up and come one by one. As Long Chang's voice fell, the people standing at the front stepped forward one by one and cut their fingertips. Drops of blood continuously dripped onto the divine stone of fate, and the blood that dripped onto it was also absorbed by the divine stone of fate. Chapter 24-24. It would take some time to gather 4,000 to 5,000 people. Qin Feiyong didn't say a word as he watched their expressions change. Everyone seemed to reveal a trace of panic after dripping blood on their bodies. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed as he transmitted his voice. Big Wolf Dog, I'll remove my control over you right now. Saying so, he secretly removed his control over the big black wolf. The big black wolf looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. This surprise came too suddenly, he was caught off guard. Qin Feiyang smiled. You're free now, you can leave if you want. You're abandoning me? The big black wolf was stunned and asked secretly. Qin Feiyang was speechless. I've opened the door of potential for you, and helped you improve your cultivation. What else do you want? Don't tell me you're really going to rely on me. Of course. Unless you give me Big Sister's axe. Otherwise, even if you have the coiling dragon staff, don't think you can chase me away. The big black wolf snorted. Scoundrel. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. The big black wolf laughed. I'm a scoundrel, what can you do about it? Up to you. Qin Feiyang shook his head. About an hour later. Finally, it was Qin Feiyang, the young man, and the big black wolf's turn. The big black wolf transmitted his voice. Big brother, it's not too late to run now. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed as he looked up at the young man and smiled. Brother, don't sleep anymore. The young man slowly opened his eyes and asked in confusion, Have we arrived? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. He wanted to let the young man go first and see his reaction. The young man rubbed his eyes and yawned as if he would never wake up. Then, he jumped down from the snow python's head and landed beside Long Chong. Please drip a drop of blood on it. Long Chong held the divine stone of fate with both hands and respectfully handed it to the young man. Dripping blood? The young man looked at the stone of fate in surprise. Without saying anything, he cut his finger and dropped a drop of blood onto the stone, which was quickly absorbed. After the divine stone of fate absorbed the blood, the young man looked at the divine stone of fate in surprise. How strange. Qin Feiyang felt a chill in his heart. However, the young man still didn't say anything. He turned to Qin Feiyang and said, It's your turn. Qin Feiyang noticed a trace of disdain in the young man's eyes. This wasn't disdain for him, but disdain for the stone of fate. Since the young man was so disdainful, he had nothing to worry about. Qin Feiyang walked over, cut his finger and dripped a drop of blood on it. Seeing this, the big black wolf could only helplessly follow. After the stone of fate absorbed the blood, Qin Feiyang's expression froze. He could feel that his soul seemed to have been shackled out of nowhere. And this shackle was enough to destroy his soul. This seemed to be the fate contract of the dragons. Because this feeling was exactly the same as the last time he entered Divine Land, and was controlled by the Princess of the Dragons. Just in a different way. When the Princess of the Dragons controlled him, it was a milky white mark. But this time, it was directly dripping blood on the stone of fate. But the effect should be the same. It could erase the other party's soul. Big brother, you're in big trouble. After the big black wolf dripped blood, he stared at Qin Feiyang angrily. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. If it was really the fate contract, he wasn't afraid at all. Because the slave seal could be removed. And you? Long Chong looked at the snow python again. The snow python looked at the young man. The young man nodded. The snow python sighed. Like the big black wolf, its expression was full of helplessness. Finally, everyone was dripping blood. Behind the stone door was a large square that could accommodate tens of thousands of people. Everyone was gathered in the square at this moment, looking ahead with surprise in their eyes. And the young man jumped on the snow python's head again and closed his eyes to take a nap. The snow python carried the young man and followed Qin Feiyang and the big black wolf. They crossed the stone door and stood behind the crowd, looking at the Dragon God Palace. The entire Dragon God Palace was made up of floating islands. They were of different sizes, but even the smallest island was several times larger than the Ninth Heaven Palace. Qin Feiyang made a preliminary calculation. With his current speed, it would take him half a day to cross the smallest island. Not to mention the largest island, it might take him several days. And below the island, there was an endless sea of clouds. This is too spectacular. Although I have heard that the Dragon God Palace is floating above the sea of clouds, I don't know how shocking it is until I see it with my own eyes. And did you notice it? The essence here is so rich. Not only that, but also the energy of the spirit vein and crystal vein. People muttered. Long Chong smiled proudly and said, The sea of clouds you see is the energy of the spirit vein and crystal vein. What? Everyone was dumbfounded. This time, even Qin Feiyang couldn't stay calm. The energy of the spirit vein and crystal vein could actually transform into an endless sea of clouds? How many spirit veins and crystal veins did it take to reach this level? The big black wolf rolled his eyes and secretly laughed. Big brother, I'm starting to look forward to it. Me too. Qin Feiyang transmitted. If they could loot all the spirit vein and crystal vein of the Dragon God Palace, then the Black Tortoise world would definitely undergo earth-shattering changes. Because until now, other than the Devil's Land, the Black Tortoise world didn't have a single spirit vein or crystal vein. In other words, right now, the creatures of the Black Tortoise world were still absorbing essence to cultivate. How could the speed of absorbing essence chi and cultivating compare to refining soul stones? A bunch of bumpkins. Long Chong looked at Qin Feiyang and the others disdainfully, flew to the front of the Dragon God Palace Master, and respectfully handed over the Divine Stone of Destiny. The Dragon God Palace Master took the Divine Stone of Destiny, and the corner of his mouth immediately pursed into a sneer, lowering his head to look at the young man lying on the snow python's head. The young man had his eyes closed, completely unaware. A hint of ferocity flashed in the eyes of the Dragon God Palace Master. In all the years he had been in charge of the Dragon God Palace, no one had ever dared to be so arrogant in front of him. Kneel. He suddenly opened his mouth, and like a bell, it shook the blood of everyone present. Kneel. Who are you telling to kneel? Everyone immediately raised their heads and looked at the Dragon God Palace Master in surprise. But when they saw the Dragon God Palace Master staring at the young man, they understood in their hearts. It turned out that he was telling the young man to kneel. Qin Feiyang looked at the Dragon God Palace Master, who suddenly became angry, then looked at the young man who was still sleeping soundly, and frowned slightly. Big brother? What's going on? This person didn't say anything before. Why is he suddenly angry now? Big Black Wolf was surprised. Qin Feiyang didn't answer, and his gaze swept back and forth between the Dragon God Palace Master and the young man. Suddenly, he looked at the Divine Stone of Destiny in the hands of the Dragon God Palace Master, and revealed a look of understanding. Because of the Divine Stone of Destiny, Qin Feiyang glanced at Big Black Wolf and thought to himself, Divine Stone of Destiny? Big Black Wolf was stunned. Yes, Long Chong must have told this person about the young man's strength. Facing such an unfathomable young man, this person isn't confident, so he endured and didn't say anything before. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. I see. He's waiting for the young man to drip blood. After the young man is controlled by the Divine Stone of Destiny, the young man's life will be in his hands, so he has no qualms about making a move now. Big Black Wolf thought to himself. That's right. Qin Feiyang nodded. This person is very shrewd. Big Black Wolf looked at the Dragon God Palace Master with fear. Without shrewdness, how can he control such a big Dragon God Palace? However, speaking of which, Qin Feiyang's expression became playful. However what? Big Black Wolf was suspicious. Wait for a good show. Qin Feiyang thought to himself. The disdain shown by the young man was enough to show that he didn't care about the Divine Stone of Destiny at all. Big Black Wolf was stunned, looked up at the young man, and the corner of his mouth twitched. The young man was still lying on the head of the snow python, snoring. He actually fell asleep so quickly. Such a strong person, and he's still so sleepy? He must have contracted some strange disease, right? People were also extremely speechless. And when the Dragon God Palace Master saw this, his face became more and more gloomy. Long Chong on the side also had a look of astonishment. Obviously, he also didn't expect that the Dragon God Palace Master would suddenly attack. But like Qin Feiyang, when he saw the Divine Stone of Destiny in the hands of the Dragon God Palace Master, he immediately understood. It wasn't that the Palace Master didn't attack before, but he was waiting for the right time. And now the time has come. The Palace Master told you to kneel, didn't you hear? Thinking of this, Long Cheng's face was full of sneers, and he was no longer afraid. He landed on the head of the snow python, and directly kicked the young man. The young man immediately rolled down like a rubber ball and hit the ground. And the snow python was so scared that it collapsed on the spot. The people crowded in the square immediately retreated one after another. What's going on? The young man got up, scratched his head, and looked at everyone with sleepy eyes. Qin Feiyang and Big Black Wolf looked at each other, both speechless. He was kicked down, and he didn't even know? I'm convinced. I'm really convinced. It's really a miracle that this person can live until now. How did this young master fall down? The young man looked confused, looked at the snow python and said, "Little reptile, did you throw this young master down?" The snow python shook its head repeatedly, like a rattle drum. The young man noticed Long Chong again and frowned. "Why are you standing on the head of this young master's mount?" Long Chong was also extremely speechless. What kind of freak is this? Cough cough. Brother, let me give you a friendly reminder. He was the one who kicked you down. And our palace master asked you to kneel. Big Black Wolf really couldn't stand it anymore, and looked at the young man and said, "Kick down? Kneel." The young man was stunned. Long Chong stood on the head of the snow python, looking down at Qin Feiyang and Big Black Wolf, and said, "Not only him, but also you. Immediately kneel to this seat." "Are you looking at this emperor bird?" Big Black Wolf rolled its eyes. Qin Feiyang also directly ignored it. Long Chong was so angry that he was trembling, looked up at the Dragon God Palace Master, and said angrily, "Master, did you see that?" After entering the Dragon God Palace, they are still so arrogant. They don't put us dragons in their eyes at all. The Dragon God Palace Master's face was gloomy. At this very moment, merely the gloomy expression on his face was enough to make everyone present feel fear. Chapter 24-25. Li Bu-er quickly kneel down and apologize. Bear with it for a while. How can you guys have a good ending for challenging the Lord of the Temple? Don't implicate us. The people around all transmitted their voices. They were afraid of being implicated. If you're afraid of being implicated, then get lost. The Big Black Wolf shouted coldly. It's for your own good, and you don't appreciate it? Fine. Do you want to die? Up to you. Everyone glared at the Big Black Wolf angrily, and left the square. They stood above the sea of clouds with sneers in their eyes. Long Chong looked at the two people, and the wolf again, and said in a deep voice, "I advise you not to challenge the patience of the Lord of the Temple. Have you said enough?" The young man's voice sounded. Swoosh. As he spoke, the young man took a step forward, and instantly appeared on the head of the snow python. He stretched out his arm and grabbed Long Chong. "What are you trying to do?" Long Chong panicked and hurriedly shouted, "What am I doing? In this life other than my parents, no one has dared to point at me, let alone kick me. You're the first. Tell me, how should I repay you?" The young man chuckled, still as lazy as ever. Long Chong cried out in horror, "Lord of the Temple, save me." Now he only had the dragon soul left. If he was killed again, even if the heavenly king descended, he wouldn't be able to save him. The Lord of the Dragon God Temple looked at the young man gloomily and said, "Do you know what you're doing now?" And then, the young man raised his head, and looked at the Lord of the Dragon God Temple, with a trace of playfulness on his listless face. "Your blood has been absorbed by the Stone of Destiny. The destiny contract has been formed. Now, I only need to erase the blood you left in the Stone of Destiny, and your soul will disappear. Do you know what it means to have your soul disappear? It means death." The Lord of the Dragon God Temple laughed sinisterly. "So it's the destiny contract. I've long heard of this kind of contract. I didn't expect it to be used on us today. Looks like we won't be able to escape from the dragons from now on." Hearing the Lord of the Dragon God Temple's words, everyone couldn't help but feel terrified. "Big brother, did you hear that? I told you not to enter the Dragon God's palace, but you wouldn't listen. Now look at you, your life is in their hands." When the Big Black Wolf heard this, it was also incomparably remorseful. "Don't worry, a mere fate contract is nothing to me." Qin Feiyang smiled. As long as it was indeed a fate contract, there was nothing to worry about. "What do you mean?" When the Big Black Wolf heard this, it looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "I was once controlled by a fate contract, but aren't I still alive and well? Have you been controlled before?" The Big Black Wolf was stunned. Suddenly, A trace of understanding appeared in its eyes. It said in surprise, "You can come into contact with fate contracts." Qin Feiyang said, "If you want, I can remove it now." Haha. The big black wolf immediately laughed in its heart. It turned out that Qin Feiyang was confident. No wonder he was not worried at all. Now it was relieved. Obliterate the divine soul. The young man muttered to himself. You are indeed very strong. But as long as you are controlled by the fate god stone, no matter how strong you are, it is useless. If this seat wants to kill you now, it will be as easy as crushing an ant. So I advise you, you better be obedient. And my Dragon God Palace only needs obedient dogs. The Dragon God Palace Master said coldly. What? Only obedient dogs? He actually treats us all like dogs. Too much, too much. Before controlling us, this was not his attitude. Those standing above the sea of clouds suddenly had angry looks on their faces. Although the Dragon God Palace Master's words were said to the young man, as long as one was not an idiot, one could tell that it included them. But they only dared to be angry, but did not dare to say anything. Not to mention that their lives were being controlled. Even if they were not facing the dragons, they would not dare to be rash. Not to mention, the other party was the Dragon God Palace Master. The young man was stunned. He looked at the Dragon God Palace Master and said, in other words, this young master can only choose to be obedient. That's right. The Dragon God Palace Master nodded. Obedient, the young man murmured. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth rose, and he smiled at the Dragon God Palace Master. His 5 fingers slightly exerted force. Accompanied by a shrill scream, Long Cheng's soul shattered on the spot. What? He actually dares to attack. Seeing this scene, those standing above the sea of clouds all widened their eyes in anger. His life was being controlled by the divine stone of fate, and he still dared to kill? Was he not afraid at all? The Dragon God Palace Master was also caught off guard by this scene. He originally thought that the young man would not dare to be presumptuous again. But he did not expect that he would kill Long Chong in the blink of an eye. Although Long Chong was weak, he was a dragon after all. And he was also the law enforcement palace master of the Dragon God Palace. Wasn't this behavior provoking them dragons? Boom! When the Dragon God Palace Master thought of this, his killing intent soared. A monstrous divine aura rolled toward the young man like a torrent. What's going on? This is the Palace Master's divine aura. Who angered the Palace Master? In the distance, on those islands, one figure after another flew out, stood in the air above the islands, and looked towards the entrance. Their faces were full of shock and bewilderment. The young man shook his head and sighed. Don't fight with this young master anymore. You deserve to die 10,000 times. The Dragon God Palace Master roared, his killing intent soaring into the sky. His divine sense poured into the divine stone of fate, obviously wanting to erase the blood left by the young man inside. Why won't you listen? The young man spread out his hands, looking very helpless. Whoosh! In the next instant, the young man appeared in front of the Dragon God Palace Master, and pointed at the Dragon God Palace Master's forehead. What? So fast? The Dragon God Palace Master's expression changed, and he retreated without hesitation. But at the same time, a destructive aura suddenly erupted from the young man's fingertip. The Dragon God Palace Master's forehead immediately split open, and blood flowed out. Immediately after, with a crack, the Dragon God Palace Master's head exploded like a watermelon, and flesh and blood flew all over the sky. His body was also torn apart. Finally, with a bang, his body was also shattered. Whoosh! A black divine dragon escaped from the flesh and blood. It was the dragon soul of the Dragon God Palace Master. At this moment, his eyes were full of horror. With the power of a finger, his head was shattered. Was this person really just a half-step undying realm? The young man no longer paid attention to the dragon soul of the Dragon God Palace Master. He grabbed the divine stone of fate and shook his head. This place is getting more and more boring. Why don't we go directly to meet the ancestral dragons and dragon sovereigns? Qin Feiyang and Big Black Wolf were astonished. This guy was too arrogant. But they had to admit that this person was really strong. Let's not talk about what his cultivation level was, because no one could see through it. Just now, His strength was enough to kill the Dragon God Palace Master. Perhaps only the ancestral dragons and dragon sovereigns could subdue him. And the others in the Sea of Clouds, including the Dragon God Palace Master, were even more shocked when they heard the young man's words. He actually wanted to run to the ancestral dragons and dragon sovereigns. Who the hell was this person? Forget it. The young man pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, "Anyway, they will take the initiative to come to me sooner or later. I'll just wait for them here." The Dragon God Palace Master was completely speechless. He really had to prepare to fight the ancestral dragons and dragon sovereigns. "You'd better go find them now. My Dragon God Palace is too small to accommodate a great god like you." This was from the bottom of his heart. The Dragon God Palace Master was really scared. If such a terrifying guy stayed in the Dragon God Palace, who knew what kind of trouble he would cause? He's actually scared. This is really a strange story. His body was shattered with a wave of his hand. How could he not be afraid? If it were me, I would also be like him, praying to the gods and Buddha to send this person away. Qin Feiyang and the big black wolf discussed in a low voice. The young man glanced at the Dragon God Palace, then returned to the snow python's head, and continued to lie down, playing with the divine stone of fate, and said, "It's a little small, but it's okay, I don't mind." The Dragon God Palace Master wanted to cry, but had no tears. It seemed that this person couldn't be sent away even if he wanted to. Wasn't this too unlucky to have attracted such a fiend? The Dragon God Palace Master said. "Then can you return the divine stone of fate to me? This young master will help you keep it first." The young man said, "No way. This was personally refined by the dragon sovereign. If I lose it, I won't be able to keep my life. Take it as me begging you, okay?" The Dragon God Palace Master exclaimed. "If you didn't provoke this young master, would this divine stone of fate have fallen into this young master's hands now? Enough. Stop arguing. This young master wants to rest." "That's right. Long Chong is dead. Then the position of the law enforcement palace master is for this young master to play with." With that, the young man put the divine stone of fate into his body, no longer paying attention to the Dragon God Palace Master, and closed his eyes to take a nap. The Dragon God Palace Master was about to cry. His physical body was gone, and the divine stone of fate was lost. How was he going to explain this to the dragon sovereign? "Hee, now you know how to cry. What were you doing earlier?" The big black wolf laughed at his misfortune. "Shut up." The Dragon God Palace Master glared at the big black wolf. The big black wolf ran directly to the young man's side and shouted, "Try being fierce again?" The Dragon God Palace Master's mentality immediately exploded. Being bullied by a human was one thing, but now even a dog was riding on his head to behave atrociously. "Just you wait. I will make you pay the price." The Dragon God Palace Master secretly snorted, then turned and left dejectedly. What's going on? Why is the Palace Master only left with his divine soul? Where's his physical body? When the Dragon God Palace Master passed through the air above the major islands, the people on the islands were extremely surprised and bewildered. On the square, at this moment, there was also a dead silence. Everyone looked at the young man. Their expressions were very interesting. There was shock, there was doubt, and there was also fear that couldn't be dispelled. Did you see what happened to Long Chong and the Dragon God Palace Master? This is the result of going against us. In the future, behave yourselves for this emperor. The big black wolf stood on the head of the snow python proudly, looking at those people and shouting. Yes, yes, yes. Everyone nodded and bowed, their faces full of flattery. Although it was a dog, there was no other way. Who asked it to have such a good relationship with the young man? Chapter 24-26. Qin Feiyang glanced at the big black wolf. Although this guy likes to show off, its loyalty is still good. Let it be. Anyway, these people need to be taught a lesson. Qin Feiyang looked at the young man again. The divine stone of fate. This thing is not ordinary. Controlling the divine stone of fate is equivalent to controlling the entire Dragon God Palace. Now, he couldn't help but start to doubt the young man's motives. Did the young man enter the Dragon God Palace for the divine stone of fate? But that's not right. If it's really for the divine stone of fate, why didn't he leave now that he got it? Who exactly is this person? Also, this person mentioned his parents before. If he himself was so strong, then how strong were his parents? Mystery. I can't figure it out at all. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath. Let's not care about this first. Let's remove the divine stone of fate first. Because no one knows if the young man will return the divine stone of fate to the Dragon God Palace Master. If it is returned to the Dragon God Palace Master, then he and the Big Black Wolf will definitely be threatened by the Dragon God Palace Master, or even directly erase their divine souls. And it is impossible for him to stay with the young man every day. There is no way to prevent this. So, when it comes to life and death, he can't rely on luck. At this point, Qin Feiyang's mind moved and secretly operated the slave seal. Crack. The shackles that bound the divine soul were shattered at once. At the same time, the young man opened his eyes with a trace of suspicion and took out the divine stone of fate. He can actually sense it. Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. Fortunately, the person controlling the divine stone of fate is the young man. If it is the Dragon God Palace Master, there will definitely be big trouble. The young man looked at the divine stone of fate for a while, then suddenly turned his head to glance at Qin Feiyang. There was a trace of meaning in his lazy eyes, but he didn't say anything, put away the divine stone of fate, closed his eyes and dozed off. Qin Feiyang breathed a sigh of relief. Although he didn't know the identity of the young man, at least for now, this person has no ill intentions towards him. If you follow us in the future, you might have a way out. But if you dare to go against us, you won't even know how you died. Do you understand? The Big Black Wolf was still acting cool, valiant, high-spirited, and awe-inspiring. Understood. The group of people nodded repeatedly. The Big Black Wolf smiled proudly, jumped down from the snow python's head, ran to Qin Feiyang's side and laughed. I never thought that there would be a day where I could be arrogant in the Dragon God Palace. This time, I can really hold my head up high. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes and said, Be careful. The higher you jump, the more painful it will be when you fall. Of course not. The Big Black Wolf shook its head. With the young man's support, who would dare to scheme against it? Qin Feiyang shook his head. This damned dog was a classic example of not shedding tears until it entered the coffin. It was true that he had the support of the young man now. But what about in the future? Who could guarantee that the young man would always protect them? In the end, he might even become the young man's enemy. Life was unpredictable. Li Bu Lord Wolf, what should we do next? We can't just stand here forever. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang and the Big Black Wolf. Originally, they wanted to ask the young man, but the young man was sleeping. Who dared to disturb him? So they took a step back and asked Qin Feiyang and the Big Black Wolf. The Big Black Wolf couldn't handle it. It didn't know anything about the Dragon God Palace. How would it know how to deal with it? Qin Feiyang was also at a loss. Long Chang was supposed to lead the way, but Long Chang was dead. Long Chang's death was not a big deal, because there was still the Dragon God Palace Master. But the Dragon God Palace Master had also been beaten away. There was no other way. They couldn't just barge in recklessly. Whoosh! At this moment, accompanied by the sound of air breaking, an old man with white hair and a pure white robe, who looked like an immortal, flew over. Everyone looked at the old man. The white-robed old man landed on the sea of clouds with a kind face, like an immortal descending to the mortal world. His aura is very strong. The Big Black Wolf whispered. Qin Feiyang nodded. The aura exuded by this old man was not inferior to the snow python at all. He must also be a peak ninth heaven realm. I am the Deputy Palace Master of the Law Enforcement Palace. I have specially come to greet the Palace Master. As the white-robed old man spoke, he looked at the young man lying on the snow python's head. What? Palace Master? The Dragon God Palace Master really agreed to let him be the Palace Master of the Law Enforcement Palace. Everyone was stunned. They all thought that the Dragon God Palace Master would take this matter as a joke. But they didn't expect that he would send someone to welcome him in the blink of an eye. Qin Feiyang and the Big Black Wolf also looked at each other. What did the Dragon God Palace Master want to do? The Palace Master of the Law Enforcement Palace was the most important position in the Dragon God Palace. How could he be so careless? Big brother, is this what the Dragon God Palace master plans to do? Agree to the young man first, hold him down, and wait for the dragon sovereign and the other ancestral dragons to come. Then slowly settle the score? The big black wolf transmitted its voice. Qin Feiyang laughed secretly. Not bad. You know how to think about problems. This emperor is smart, okay? It's just that I don't like to use my brain usually. The big black wolf sneered. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, looking at the white-robed old man. Don't say it. Maybe it was just as the big black wolf said. This was just a delaying tactic. Looking at the young man again. His eyes were closed, and there was no reaction at all. Snore. There was even a faint snoring sound. Obviously, he fell asleep again. The white-robed old man smiled helplessly, looked at everyone and said, "Follow this old man." With that, the white-robed old man turned and flew towards the first island on the opposite side. The group of people hurriedly followed. Big brother, I don't seem to feel the aura of a divine dragon on him. The big black wolf stared at the back of the white-robed old man and muttered, I don't feel it either. I think he's not a divine dragon, but a human. Qin Feiyang said. The big black wolf said in surprise. A human can also get to the position of the deputy palace master of the law enforcement palace? What does that have to do with anything? The deputy palace master doesn't have much real power. As long as the palace masters of the various halls are dragons, then the entire Dragon God Palace is basically under the control of the dragons. Qin Feiyang said. In name only. The big black wolf nodded in realization. Don't worry about this for now, bear with it. Don't say anything. I'll help you remove the fate contract. Qin Feiyang secretly said, and then formed a seal with both hands. So fast. The big black wolf was slightly stunned, and then mentally prepared himself. Qin Feiyang glanced in front of him, and seeing that no one was paying attention, he pressed the slavery seal into the top of the big black wolf's head. The big black wolf's face suddenly became distorted. He finally knew that the way to remove the fate contract was to use the slavery seal. Crack! Very soon, the fate contract that bound the big black wolf was also removed. It's good to regain my freedom. The big black wolf couldn't help but want to roar. Wait, big brother. If the fate contract is removed, how are we going to pass through the entrance in the future? Only those who signed the fate contract could freely enter and exit. But now that the fate contract was gone, that meant that they would never be able to leave the Dragon God Palace again. Isn't that the same as trapping themselves in a cage? Don't worry. I already knew that there would be a way. Qin Feiyang faintly smiled. Alright then. This emperor will be in charge of raiding and robbing. The big black wolf snickered. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. He had never seen him think of anything good. A few moments later, under the guidance of the white-robed old man, they finally arrived at the first island. Above the island, there were a lot of people standing there, curiously looking at Qin Feiyang's group. This place is called the first island of the Dragon God Palace. Everyone who enters the Dragon God Palace starts from here. Wait a bit, you guys can go find a cave and rest first. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask the master of the first island, or ask those old people who came in before you. The white-robed old man turned to look at everyone and smiled. Someone asked, what about the other islands? The other islands are all better than the first island, but you'll have to rely on your own ability to meet certain requirements before you can enter. Do your best. After the white-robed old man finished speaking, he looked at the snow python and said, Bring the palace master and follow me. He's not with us? The big black wolf was stunned and hurriedly asked. Of course. He's now the law enforcement palace master of our Dragon God Palace. Naturally he won't stay with you disciples. The white-robed old man said, then turned and flew towards the Dragon God Palace. The snow python looked at Qin Feiyang for help. Go. Qin Feiyang smiled. Sigh. The snow python sighed, and could only carry the young man and fly towards the white-robed old man. It couldn't stay in the Dragon God Palace for a moment longer. But it had no choice. The young man was sleeping on its head. How could it dare to escape? The newcomer is here. Quick, quick, quick. Prepare the welcoming ceremony. As soon as the white-robed old man left, The people on the island became excited. Welcoming ceremony? There's no need for that, someone said with a smile. No. It wasn't easy for you to pass the assessment. No matter what, we have to welcome you to show our respect. Are you ready? The people on the island laughed. It's embarrassing. All right. It's hard to refuse such kindness, we're ready. The group of 4,000 to 5,000 people all had smiles on their faces. These disciples of the Dragon God Palace were quite easy to get along with. Step back. Qin Feiyong glanced at the people on the island, said something to the big black wolf, and silently stepped back. What are you doing? Isn't this a welcoming ceremony? The big black wolf was suspicious. This kind of welcoming ceremony is definitely not a good thing. Qin Feiyong laughed. He remembered that there was also such a welcoming ceremony in the spiritual state sacred palace. And this welcoming ceremony was a foot-washing ceremony. At that time, he was caught off guard and his whole body was wet. However, those who splashed the water to wash his feet also paid a heavy price. So, he wouldn't suffer the same loss twice. The ceremony begins. Brother, don't be shy, throw it. With a loud roar. Almost everyone standing above the island took out a colorful balloon from their interspatial ring. Then, they grabbed the balloons and threw them at the 4,000 to 5,000 people. Balloons? Is it so childish? The 4,000 to 5,000 people were still laughing. Whoosh! When those balloons hit their bodies, they immediately exploded. Orange-yellow water splashed out like a waterfall. Except for Qin Feiyong and the big black wolf, almost everyone was completely wet. Chapter 24-27. Sure enough, all of them aren't young anymore, yet they're still playing such childish tricks. Wait, this isn't right. What's this smell? The group of people smelled the odor on their bodies, and their faces suddenly changed. This isn't water. This is immediately. Everyone raised their heads and glared at the people on the island. What's wrong? Are you satisfied with this welcome ceremony? This is something we specially collected from the beasts. The people on the island laughed mockingly. You bastards! Someone roared. Aya. Don't look like you're going to bite people. When we entered the Dragon God Palace before, we also received this treatment. Do you know why there is such a different welcome ceremony? It's because of the dragons. The dragons want to humiliate us on purpose. Entering the Dragon God Palace, we have already lost our dignity as human beings, because we are traitors to humanity. And doing this again is to completely destroy our last trace of dignity. In the future, we will be like dogs, listening to their orders and working for them. The people on the island said. Hearing these words, the 4,000 to 5,000 people fell silent. Now do you feel that the Dragon God Palace is not as good as you thought before? That's for sure. Once upon a time, we were just like you, full of longing for the Dragon God Palace. Let's not talk too much, at least have a little respect. But that's not the case. When you enter the Dragon God Palace, you will know how cruel this place is, and how lowly humans are. To say something that you can't accept, we're worse than animals. But so what? There's no turning back. So the same goes for all of you. From now on, be obedient dogs of the dragons. Haha. This is the price to pay for entering the Dragon God Palace. It's too late to regret. Accompanied by loud laughter, the people standing on the island disappeared into the mountains below like lightning. Damn, fortunately, big brother, you had the foresight. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing. Big Black Wolf looked at those embarrassed people and couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Sigh. Qin Feiyong let out a long sigh. He glanced at the 4,000 or 5,000 people in front of him, and there was a trace of sympathy in his eyes. They all came here with dreams. He knew it too. Entering the Dragon God Temple, for example, would be met with contempt by the dragons. But just like what those people said before, even though humans were ruled by dragons, at the very least, they would at least leave them some dignity. But as soon as he entered the Dragon God Palace, he received a sharp warning. It turned out that everything was just a figment of his imagination. The real Dragon God Temple was a place filled with darkness and no dignity. That's right. In the Dragon God Temple, they were just dogs raised by the dragons. Many people began to regret their decision. In order to come to this place, He had gone through a dangerous trial, but what did he get in return? It was humiliation. He didn't even have the chance to be a human anymore. But was it too late to regret it now? It was too late. Qin Feiyang shook his head, retracted his gaze, looked at the big black wolf and said, "Let's go." "All right." The big black wolf laughed gloatingly and followed Qin Feiyang towards the island. They did not choose to directly pass through, but to bypass those people. Why aren't they splashed? What's this? Why are we the only ones who are splashed and they aren't? Suddenly, someone discovered Qin Feiyang and the big black wolf. Seeing that they were clean, a trace of hostility immediately crept up on their faces. A portion of them even rushed towards Qin Feiyang and the big black wolf. "What are you doing?" The big black wolf was shocked and quickly shouted, "What are we doing? Since we've all come to the Dragon God Temple, we naturally have to share it together." Someone laughed sinisterly. "Scram!" The big black wolf roared. Qin Feiyang could not help but frown. After knowing the true face of the Dragon God Temple, these people's mentality collapsed, and they were probably going crazy. "We're all drenched, but you guys are fine. You must have known about it long ago. If you knew, why didn't you tell us? Watching us make a fool of ourselves. You guys are really sinister." More and more people joined in. Finally, almost everyone moved. They surrounded Qin Feiyang and the big black wolf, all of them full of hostility. The big black wolf could not help but panic and said, "If you want to die, then come. What are you relying on to be so arrogant? That young man. It's a pity that he's not here anymore. Besides, I don't care now. You've even become a dog. Are you still afraid of death? Damn it, go to hell." 4 to 5,000 people laughed sinisterly as they crazily charged towards Qin Feiyang and the big black wolf. Why are they still fighting? Do you still need to think? It must be a mental breakdown. Crazy. The people on the island heard the commotion and ran out one after another. Looking at the chaotic sky above the sea of clouds, there was no sympathy on their faces. "Big brother, what should we do? These people are really crazy," the big black wolf said anxiously. In just an instant, his entire body was covered in blood. Because among these people, there were not only war gods and divine lords, but also paragon gods. And there were quite a few of them. There were even more than a dozen perfected paragon gods. With the strength of Qin Feiyang in it, if they did not think of a way, they would definitely die. The most important thing was now, he could not let Fire Lotus come out to help. Nor could he use Fire Lotus's axe. Qin Feiyang's expression was extremely ugly. Never in his wildest dreams did he think that something like this would happen. Boom! Suddenly, a greater success paragon god charged over. The big black wolf's expression changed, and it hurriedly stood in front of Qin Feiyang. The greater success paragon god slapped the big black wolf's body. The big black wolf's body shattered on the spot, leaving only its head. "Run!" The big black wolf roared. "Bastard!" Qin Feiyang's eyes instantly turned red. He sent the big black wolf's head into the ancient castle, then waved his hand. Li Changhe and Wang Daoyuan appeared. "Don't leave a single one alive. Kill them all." Qin Feiyang shouted. "What? He has 2 early-stage 9 Heavens Realm experts by his side?" The people on the island were shocked. "Yes." Li Changhe and Wang Daoyuan responded respectfully. Waves of divine power roared out. Accompanied by miserable howls. The 4 to 5,000 people shattered in the void one after another. Their blood was like a downpour, dyeing the void and the sea of clouds red. How ruthless! He's a fierce person. The people on the island could not help but feel their scalps go numb. Stop! Suddenly, a loud roar exploded somewhere on the first island, followed by a terrifying aura. This voice. It's the island master. The eyes of the people on the island trembled. They seemed to be extremely wary. Li Changhe and Wang Daoyuan looked at the island in shock, then turned to Qin Feiyang and said, "Young master, what should we do?" "Continue." Qin Feiyang was expressionless. Yes. The two nodded. Of the 4 to 5,000 people, only a little more than 1,000 people were left. "Don't kill us. We didn't mean to." At this moment, they had already woken up. Looking at Li Changhe and Wang Daoyuan, their eyes were filled with fear. "Sorry. This is the young master's order." The two said coldly. Their divine power turned into a wave of anger, sweeping across the sky and drowning the 1,000 people in an instant. Accompanied by countless screams, the bodies of the 1,000 people were shattered on the spot. In just a few blinks of an eye, the people who entered the Divine Dragon Palace this time were all killed. The void here was filled with a thick blood mist, like azure hell. After killing, Li Changhe and Wang Daoyuan retreated behind Qin Feiyang and stood respectfully. However, there was a faint trace of worry on their faces. Qin Feiyang scanned the island and said without turning his head, "You guys go and take a look at the big wolf dog's injuries." "All right." The two nodded. After sending the two to the castle, Qin Feiyang stepped forward and walked towards the island step by step. Can't he keep a low profile? All right. Then let's keep a high profile. Am I seeing things? He's actually just a low-level war god. Wait. It's true. Unbelievable. A low-level war god is actually so powerful? The people on the island were dumbfounded. To this, Qin Feiyang ignored them and stepped into the sky above the island. Swish. It was also at this moment. A burly man with a bare upper body and a pair of black underpants descended in front of Qin Feiyang. He was about 2 meters tall and looked to be in his 40s. His entire body was filled with an explosive power. He looked at the blood mist above the sea of clouds, and his face immediately darkened. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "You killed them all?" "That's right." Qin Feiyang nodded. Impudent. The middle-aged man was furious. If he killed them all, wouldn't that mean that he had worked for nothing this time? Qin Feiyang said indifferently. "A bunch of lunatics. What's the use of keeping them? You're still twisting words and forcing logic? It seems that if I don't teach you a lesson, you won't know your identity and worth." The middle-aged man raised his fan-like hand and slapped towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang took a step back and said indifferently, "Are you reminding me to obediently be your dragon's dog?" This burly man was the dragon's, because he had the aura of a divine dragon. Dog. You humans are even worse than dogs, okay? If we didn't need you humans as cannon fodder, why would we dragons nurture you lowly creatures? You still dare to hide. Sure. You have guts. Unfortunately, bold people don't have long lives. This island lord will kill you now. Let's see who dares to cause trouble in the Dragon God Palace in the future. The middle-aged man released his pressure and imprisoned Qin Feiyang. He was also at the perfection 9th heaven realm. All of you watch carefully. This is the result of disobedience. The middle-aged man swept his gaze across the people on the island below and landed in front of Qin Feiyang with one step. He slapped his palm towards Qin Feiyang's head. "Hey, do you think we're still outside? We're in the Dragon God Palace now. Being arrogant here is courting death. You're still too young. Since you've already lost your dignity as a human and entered the Dragon God Palace, what's the point of keeping your arrogance? Arrogance will only kill you." The people on the island below shook their heads. However, they suddenly discovered that Qin Feiyang's expression was unexpectedly calm, as if he wasn't afraid at all. Chapter 24-28. If you want to kill one to warn the others, you found the wrong target. Qin Feiyang looked at the muscular man and said indifferently, "Is that so?" The muscular man smiled coldly. His hand was covered in a layer of dragon god power, showing no mercy. Soon, that big fan-like hand was about to slap Qin Feiyang's head. Shua. Suddenly, an old woman with white hair appeared beside Qin Feiyang. The burly man was startled. The old woman raised her old hand and grabbed the muscular man's wrist. She said hoarsely, "Do you know what the consequences of angering the young master are?" Then, the old woman used her 5 fingers, and the muscular man's wrist was crushed. Blood splattered everywhere. What? There are other experts hiding beside him? She can crush the island master's wrist so easily. This old woman can't be a half-step undying expert, right? The people on the island were dumbfounded. The burly man's face was also filled with shock, because he had personally experienced the old woman's strength. She was definitely a half-step undying expert. What was the background of this young man? 2 early-stage 9 heavens realm experts and a half-step undying expert all called him young master? He was only an early-stage war god. As the first island master of the Dragon God Palace, he naturally knew about the experts of the divine land. But there was no such person in his memory. As for the current Qin Feiyang, he was looking at the white-haired old woman standing beside him. His expression was also extremely stunned. He had clearly summoned Fire Lotus. How could it be an old woman? Qindage, are you surprised? Are you surprised? A playful laughter sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. If it wasn't Fire Lotus's voice, then whose voice was it? Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. He said, "Girl, what the hell are you doing?" When Li Changhe and the other entered the castle, I knew that you might need my help. In order not to attract the attention of the dragons, I disguised myself in advance. This way, even if the dragons investigate, they'll only know that I'm your subordinate and won't connect it to my true identity. Naturally, I wouldn't think of your identity either. Fire Lotus thought. I see. That little head of yours is pretty smart. Qin Feiyang smiled. Fire Lotus said unhappily, "No matter what, I am still the palace master of the Nine Heaven Palace, okay?" Fine, fine, fine. You're good, Qin Feiyang said. Fire Lotus giggled secretly. She looked at Qin Feiyang respectfully and asked, "Young master, how should we deal with this person?" Qin Feiyang glanced at the burly man. "Let me give you a word of advice. Don't be too presumptuous, because this is the Dragon God Palace. If you dare to harm me, then you are going against the dragons. Do you know the consequences of going against us dragons?" The burly man took a few steps back and stared fiercely at Qin Feiyang. His voice was stern. Whether it was humans or beasts, they were all afraid of death. The divine dragons were no exception. However, the burly man was different. He had the confidence. His confidence came from the dragons. The divine land, and even the entire ancient world, were ruled by the dragons. All living things were ants. Who dared to provoke the dragons? Who dared to be presumptuous in front of the dragons? The dragons were the masters of this world. If it was anyone else, even if it was the Nine Heavens realm or the undead realm, they would definitely kneel in front of the burly man and beg for mercy. Because the dragons were that strong and domineering, those who complied would prosper, and those who disobeyed would die. But would Qin Feiyang be afraid of the dragons? If he was afraid of the dragons, he wouldn't have entered the divine land, let alone the Dragon God Palace. I don't know the consequences of angering you, but I am very clear about the consequences of angering me. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, turned to look at Fire Lotus, and said one word casually. Kill. Yes. Fire Lotus responded in a hoarse voice, and turned to look at the burly man. You guys are simply lawless. If you kill me, you guys will die too. The burly man roared, and a trace of panic crept up on his face. Who was this person? After coming to the Dragon God Palace, it was fine if he didn't tuck his tail between his legs, but he actually dared to threaten the dragons? How could there be such an unreasonable person? In any case, this was the dragon's territory. Couldn't they show some respect? Fire Lotus laughed and said, "Obediently offer your dog head." Her laughter was as eerie and terrifying as a ghost. Moreover, her eyes were also glowing with a dark green light. The burly man couldn't help but be scared out of his wits and turned to flee. This. The people on the island below were shocked to the extreme. The island master actually ran away? This was simply unprecedented. Since ancient times, whether it was in the Dragon God Palace or outside, it had always been the dragons bullying humans. When had a human run to the dragon's head and behave atrociously? This was creating a new precedent. At this moment, they really wanted to ask Lord Island Master, where is your dignity as a dragon? But they definitely didn't dare to ask. However, Fire Lotus didn't care at all, and said contemptuously, running away without a fight. Where is your dignity as a dragon? The burly man suddenly felt a great sense of humiliation. But he didn't dare to turn back. And he wouldn't refute. Survival was more important. Who cared about dignity? It seems that dragons are also afraid of death. Fire Lotus sneered, and took a step forward. Shwa. With a few flashes, she appeared in front of the burly man. The burly man stared angrily, and immediately braked, then turned and fled to the other side. Fire Lotus took another step forward, and stood in front of the burly man again. She sneered. There is no road to heaven and no door to earth. Do you feel despair? What do you want? The burly man roared. No one who the young master wants to kill has been able to escape. What do you think? Fire Lotus laughed hoarsely. The burly man said angrily. Then do it. Why are you chasing me like this? Don't you dragons like to play this kind of cat and mouse game? I'll let you have a taste of it now. Fire Lotus mocked. Bastard. This seat will perish together with you. The burly man roared, and a destructive aura suddenly rushed out from his body. Damn. The island master was actually forced to self-destruct. What are you still standing there for? Run. The people on the island were stunned for a moment. Then, like birds startled by the twang of a bow, they ran for their lives. Even if you want to self-destruct, you have to see who the opponent is. In front of me, you don't even have the chance to self-destruct. You can understand it as weak and lowly. Fire Lotus laughed contemptuously and took a step forward. Her old hand was like an eagle's claw, grabbing the burly man's head. Her speed was several times faster than before. The burly man did not even have the chance to react before his head exploded instantly. A tragic cry resounded through the clouds. That was the cry of the dragon soul. The dragon soul was also directly crushed by Fire Lotus. Fuck. This is too crazy, too crazy. Killing the island master so brazenly. This is probably the first time in history. They are too bold. So arrogant. Aren't they afraid of the dragons taking revenge? Believe me, this matter will definitely alarm the dragons. They will not let this matter rest. The people on the island stopped running and looked at the burly man, who fell with shock on their faces. The burly man's body gradually returned to the body of the divine dragon. Fire Lotus waved her hand and swept up the headless body of the divine dragon, then turned and flew in front of Qin Fei Yang. Well done. But what are you doing with this corpse? Stewing soup? Qin Fei Yang looked at Fire Lotus suspiciously. He did not send a voice transmission. When the people on the island below heard this, they almost staggered and fell to the ground. Stewing soup? This was like the biggest joke in the world. In today's world, who would dare to use a divine dragon to stew soup? Most importantly, this person did not hide it at all, and directly said it out loud. How much did he look down on the dragons? It seemed that he had greatly underestimated the courage of these two people. How was this looking down on the dragons? It was like treating them as livestock. Killing them, plucking their feathers, stewing them and eating them. Fire Lotus was also a little stunned and speechless. Am I delicious? No. Qin Fei Yang shook his head. This last did not seem to be very interested in food. Fire Lotus sent a voice transmission. I want to bring it to the Black Tortoise world, and put it in the various forbidden areas and divine treasures. So that's how it is. Qin Fei Yang suddenly understood. This divine dragon was at the peak of the 9 heavens realm. Dragon blood, dragon meat, dragon tendons, dragon scales, dragon bones, and so on were all treasures to the people of the Black Tortoise world. Every one of these could increase their strength by leaps and bounds. It was undoubtedly a great fortune. All of a sudden, a bitter smile appeared on Qin Fei Yang's face. What's wrong? Fire Lotus looked at him suspiciously. Qin Fei Yang shook his head. As the ruler of the Black Tortoise world, I'm completely a hands-off shopkeeper. Aren't you busy? You just focus on the matters outside. I can handle the matters of the Black Tortoise world. Besides, don't the 3 Black Panther brothers help me now? Fire Lotus laughed secretly. All right, thank you for your hard work. In the future, I'll have to hunt more divine dragons to benefit the people of the Black Tortoise world. Qin Fei Yang said secretly. Don't. Wouldn't it be better to capture them alive? I've looked carefully. There's not a single true divine dragon in our Black Tortoise world. Fire Lotus sent a voice transmission. Not even one. Qin Fei Yang was surprised. That didn't make sense. The Black Tortoise world was an independent world. How could there not be any divine dragons? Yes. Fire Lotus nodded. All right. Then let's start the dragon hunt plan. Qin Fei Yang smiled secretly. Dragon hunt plan. Fire Lotus laughed involuntarily. It seemed that the dragons wouldn't be able to live peacefully in the future. Qin Fei Yang waved his hand lightly, and Fire Lotus and the divine dragon's corpse disappeared. Then he looked down at the people on the island. Let's go. Don't be targeted by him. The dragons will come and find trouble with him sooner or later. If you're targeted by him, you'll definitely be dragged into the water. It was just a blink of an eye. The people below all fled into the mountains and disappeared from the cave abode. Am I that scary? Qin Feiyang touched his nose. Compared to the dragons, he was already very kind, okay? Little brother, you're in big trouble now. Suddenly, a sigh could be heard from below. Qin Feiyang looked down and saw an old man in green standing on the peak of a mountain on the left. The old man looked to be in his 70s or 80s, skinny and emaciated, and the aura he exuded wasn't very strong, only half a step away from the divine realm. However, there was a friendly smile on his wrinkled face. The trouble that should come will come sooner or later. Running away won't solve the problem. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and took a step forward, disappearing into the mountains below. Running away won't solve the problem, but at least it can save your life. The green-robed old man mumbled before following him into the mountains, disappearing without a trace. Chapter 24-29. What? The master of the first island was killed? Who did it? In the deepest part of the Dragon God Palace, on a huge island, there was a splendid hall of gold and jade. Inside the palace, the divine soul of the Dragon God Palace master stood at the top of the palace, looking at a black-clothed man with anger. The black-clothed man said, "It's said to be Li Bu-er." Li Bu-er? The Dragon God Palace master was stunned. After thinking for a moment, he frowned and said, "I remember that he's only a low-tier war god. He has the ability to kill a peak 9 heavens realm?" It's true. Moreover, not only the master of the first island, but all the humans we recruited this time were also killed by him. The black-clothed man said. Preposterous! Preposterous! The Dragon God Palace master was furious and shouted, "Go and kill him immediately! Lord, aren't you making things difficult for me? Let's not talk about the relationship between Li Bu-er and that young man. Li Bu-er himself is not someone I can deal with. Do you know? This Li Bu-er has 3 subordinates. 2 of them are low-tier 9 heavens realm. The other one is a half-step imperishable realm expert just like you, my lord." The black-clothed man smiled bitterly. What? Half-step undying? The Dragon God Palace master was deeply shocked again. A low-tier war god actually had a half-step undying expert by his side? Lord, I'm only a peak 9 heavens realm. I'm not enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. That's why you'll have to personally handle this matter. The black-clothed man said. I have to do it myself. The Dragon God Palace master was stunned and said angrily, "Look at my current state. Am I their match?" The black-clothed man smiled bitterly. I really don't understand. Where did these 2 come from? That young man's strength is needless to say. He's so strong that even I'm no match for him. Now this Li Bu-er also has an expert protecting him. But the crux of the matter is that I don't even have the slightest impression of these 2 people. It's as if they appeared out of thin air. The Dragon God Hall master returned to his throne, frowning in annoyance. The black-clothed man pondered for a moment and asked, "My lord, what did the ancestral dragons and Lord Dragon Sovereign say?" The Dragon God Temple master sighed. "This seat has yet to report to them." "No, my lord, this matter cannot be concealed." The black-clothed man was taken aback. The Dragon God Temple master angrily said, "Of course I know, but the divine stone of fate," the black-clothed man said. "Losing the divine stone of fate is indeed a great sin, but you were also forced to do so. This subordinate believes that the ancestral dragons and Lord Dragon Sovereign will understand. I hope so. Go to the first island now and take over the position of island master. Remember, don't be rash. Calm him down first. If there's a chance, find out his identity." The Dragon God Palace master ordered. "All right." The black-clothed man nodded, then turned around and strode away. Qin Feiyang hasn't been found yet, and now 2 mysterious characters have jumped out. What an eventful time. The Dragon God Temple master sighed and took out the image crystal. Although he was very afraid, these things definitely couldn't be hidden. If he continued to hide it, it would only anger the ancestral dragons and dragon sovereigns. So, taking the initiative to report and admit his mistake in time was the right way. The first island. On the island, mountains were stacked on top of each other. Between the mountains, vegetation was lush. But in such a large floating island, it was difficult to see a beast other than humans. In the northwest, there was a small valley. In the valley, weeds were everywhere. In the middle there was a small pool. The water was a little turbid, and lush aquatic plants floated. This place was desolate and uninhabited. The surroundings were also quiet. At this moment, a young man in black stood in the air, sizing up the valley. This young man was Qin Feiyang. He didn't want to live too close to others, so he found this place. Anyway, at that time, the deputy temple master of the law enforcement hall also said that he could cultivate anywhere. And here, although desolate, it was very quiet. Under normal circumstances, no one would disturb him. After choosing a place, Qin Feiyang casually built a cave residence on the cliff on the left side of the valley. He basically went to the castle to cultivate. Therefore, the cave residence was just a decoration to deceive others, and naturally didn't need to be meticulously decorated. He didn't even clean the valley. After setting up a barrier around the cave residence, Qin Feiyang entered the castle. Not long ago, the big black wolf stepped forward to protect him. It was seriously injured by those people. Its body was destroyed, and only its head was left. He was very worried. At this moment, the big black wolf was lying in the castle hall unconscious. However, his shattered body was rapidly recovering. Li Changhe and Wang Daoyuan were standing aside. Seeing Qin Feiyang appear, they hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, young master." Qin Feiyang looked at the two and asked, "How is the situation?" "Its injuries have been stabilized. It should wake up after its body recovers." The two of them answered respectfully. Qin Feiyang asked again, "Your spirit isn't injured, is it?" "No." The two of them shook their heads. "That's good." Qin Feiyang heaved a sigh of relief. At the big black wolf's cultivation, as long as its spirit was fine, there shouldn't be any major problems. Scanning the hall, Qin Feiyang asked again, "Where's Fire Lotus?" After coming to the castle, she left with the corpse of the divine dragon. "We don't know where she went either." The two of them were suspicious. Qin Feiyang nodded in realization. This girl was really proactive in her work. It was obvious that she must have gone to the various forbidden areas and divine treasures. "Follow me." Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, looked at the two of them, and said something. Then he turned and walked towards the cultivation room. The two of them looked at each other and hurriedly followed. After entering the cultivation room, Qin Feiyang sat in front of the desk, lowered his head, and tapped his fingers lightly on the table. He didn't say anything. No one knew what he was thinking. The two of them stood opposite him and didn't dare to make a sound. After an unknown period of time, Qin Feiyang looked up at the two of them and said, "Did Fire Lotus tell you my identity?" "Identity?" The two of them were stunned. "It seems that she didn't tell you." "Well, I'll tell you myself now. I'm not Li Bu, I'm Qin Feiyang." Qin Feiyang said. "Qin Feiyang?" The two of them were stunned again. Qin Feiyang was also stunned and said in surprise, "You don't know?" "No." The two of them shook their heads. Qin Feiyang scratched his head. This was awkward. He thought that he should be very famous, but he didn't expect that even Li Changchun and Wang Daoyuan, who had just reached the Nine Heavens state, didn't know him. It seemed that neither the dragons nor the dragon-slaying palace had told others about him. "You don't know the name Qin Feiyang, but you must know the dragon-slaying palace," Qin Feiyang said. The dragon-slaying palace. The two of them were stunned. Of course they knew. The dragon-slaying palace was the only group of people who dared to challenge the dragons. The goal of the dragon-slaying palace was to destroy the dragons. Who didn't know about it in the divine land? "I'm the young lord of the dragon-slaying palace, although I haven't admitted it yet. The Qin emperor you all know is my ancestor," Qin Feiyang said. "What?" The two of them were dumbfounded. They had never thought that the man in front of them was the young lord of the dragon-slaying palace and the descendant of the Qin emperor, one of the four emperors. His identity was too shocking. No wonder he had a half-step undying realm expert protecting him. Qin Feiyang asked again, How much do you know about the ancient castle and the Black Tortoise realm? The two of them shook their heads again. Why didn't this girl say anything? Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them helplessly and said, "The ancient castle is a heaven-defying divine artifact. The Black Tortoise realm is an independent world, and I am the master of the Black Tortoise realm." The two of them were shocked again and couldn't extricate themselves. A heaven-defying divine artifact? An independent world? Was this a joke? Li Changhe said in surprise. In other words, you are a god of creation? A god of creation? Qin Feiyang laughed self-deprecatingly and shook his head. With my strength, do I deserve to be a god of creation? But didn't you just say that you are the master of the Black Tortoise realm? Li Changhe were suspicious. I can dominate everything, but I can't create everything. Only when I can create everything will I be a true god of creation, Qin Feiyang said indifferently. So that's how it is. The two of them nodded in realization. Even so, it was shocking enough. Dominating a world, and possessing a heaven-defying divine artifact. No wonder he dared to act so arrogantly. I'm arrogant? That's not right. If those people didn't hurt the big wolf dog, would I have killed them? Qin Feiyang said. Yes. Young master, whatever you say is right. The two of them nodded and smiled flatteringly. What do you mean whatever I say is right? This is the truth. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at the two of them and said, You probably don't know about the ancient castle and the Black Tortoise realm's time rules, right? Time rules? The two of them looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with surprise. Young master, you don't say, but we do find it strange. We have been here for a long time, but when you summoned us to kill those people, we found that only a short while had passed outside. What's going on? The two of them looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Because the time rules here are different from the outside. A day outside is 10 years here. Qin Feiyang said. It can't be. The two of them looked at each other. A day outside is 10 years here? That's too ridiculous. I'm not telling you this to show off, but to give you a warning. Work hard for me, and perhaps I will grant you a supreme opportunity. But if you dare to obey, then you will only face one path, death. Qin Feiyang said. The two of them trembled and hurriedly knelt on the ground, shouting, We will do our best to serve you, young master, and never betray you. They didn't dare to betray him. Their lives were in Qin Feiyang's hands. What else could they do? Very good. Get up. Qin Feiyang nodded. The two of them trembled as they stood up, looking very scared. Don't be so nervous. As long as you are loyal to me, I will treat you well. Take the big wolfhound for example. It hasn't been with me for long, but for it, I will kill those people even if I have to expose my identity. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. The moment the big black wolf was injured, he really had the impulse to open up the killing zone and kill in all directions. But when he thought of the mission, he endured it. But even so, letting Li Changhe and Fire Lotus take action was also a huge risk. Because the dragons would definitely investigate him and settle the score with him. These were all problems he had to face. Understood. Li Changhe and Fire Lotus nodded. They didn't know Qin Feiyang, so they didn't know what kind of person Qin Feiyang was. But now, they had no choice. They could only pray silently in their hearts that this young master was really such a person. Chapter 2430. Okay, let's get down to business. Which city did that white-robed old woman come from? Qin Feiyang asked. Old woman in white? Li Changhe and the other man were slightly stunned as they looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. She's the old witch who came looking for trouble on the plains. Qin Feiyang said. So it's her. The two understood. Back then in the plains, that white-robed old woman relied on the dragon race behind her to bully the young master. I know her. She's in Holy Dragon City, which is outside the Dragon God Mountain Range. It's not far from us. Holy Dragon City is also one of the biggest cities in the north, Wang Daoyuan said. Qin Feiyang was surprised. So familiar? Are you also from Holy Dragon City? I was one of the 10 guard commanders of the City Lord Mansion, but because the City Lord was too harsh, I left the City Lord Mansion and joined the Dragon God Mountain Range. Wang Daoyuan said. You're still a guard commander of the City Lord Mansion? Qin Feiyang paused and asked, "Then who's the city lord of Holy Dragon City?" "The city lord is called Li Mingyuan, and he's at the peak of the Nine Heavens realm. Under Li Mingyuan are the first commander and second commander. The first commander is at the peak of the Nine Heavens realm. The second commander is at the peak of the Nine Heavens realm. Below the two great commanders are the 10 great commanders of the imperial bodyguards. Of the 10 commanders, 4 are at the peak of the Nine Heavens realm and 6 are at the peak of the Nine Heavens realm. I'm one of them," Wang Daoyuan said honestly. Qin Feiyang said, "So you're still at the bottom?" "Bottom?" Wang Daoyuan paused and smiled bitterly. "Sort of." Qin Feiyang asked, "Where does that old witch usually stay?" "She's the messenger of the dragons. Although her cultivation isn't as strong as ours, even Li Mingyuan doesn't dare to do anything. However, she rarely meddles in the affairs of the city. She has always been hiding in the back mountain of the city lord's mansion to cultivate," Wang Daoyuan said. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while, then asked, "Do you know about the city lord's mansion's treasury and medicinal fields?" "Treasure vault? Herbal field?" Wang Daoyuan looked at Qin Feiyang and said in a daze, "Young master, you wouldn't." Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "You see through but don't say it." Wang Daoyuan and Li Changhe looked at each other. Since ancient times, no one had ever dared to target the Holy Dragon City's treasure trove and herb fields. This young lord was indeed not an ordinary person. This subordinate knows the location of the herbal field. Even though I've never been to the herb field before, I've heard of it after working in the city lord manor for so many years. However, this subordinate truly does not know the location of the treasury. The only people who know about this are the dragon's emissary, Li Mingyuan, the first commander, and the second commander. Wang Daoyuan said, "It doesn't matter, as long as we know where the herbal field is." Qin Feiyang chuckled. Compared to the treasure vault, he preferred the herbal field, because the spirit vein and crystal vein were basically under the herbal field. Wang Daoyuan asked cautiously, "Young master, when do you plan to take action?" "Tonight. But before that, I have to find someone to take me out of the Dragon God Palace." "All right. You guys go out first, I'll think about it." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said, "Yes." The two bowed and left. Qin Feiyang sat alone at the desk, lowered his head and pondered. A moment later, Qin Feiyang suddenly got up and left the castle. When he walked out of the cave, he immediately sensed a divine sense. Moreover, it was a very strong divine sense. Qin Feiyang frowned, rose into the air, stood above the valley and scanned the surroundings. Soon, he saw a black-clothed man above a giant peak in the distance. The black-clothed man also looked at Qin Feiyang from afar. "Peak Nine Heavens realm. The aura of the divine dragon," Qin Feiyang whispered. At this moment, the black-clothed man turned into a stream of light and flew towards Qin Feiyang. "Coming for me?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Swish! Soon, the black-clothed man landed opposite Qin Feiyang and frowned. "You are Li Buer?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and asked suspiciously, "May I ask who you are?" The black-clothed man said, "You killed the island master of the first island. Someone has to take over." Qin Feiyang suddenly realized and said, "So you are now the island master of the first island?" "Yes. I hope that during the period when I am in charge of the first island, we can get along peacefully." The black-clothed man revealed a smile and said, "Get along peacefully?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. This shouldn't be something that the dragons should say, right? "You might be a little surprised, but I have never looked at people and have never discriminated against you humans," the black-clothed man said. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. "You don't have to be so vigilant. After spending some time together, you will naturally know what kind of person I am." As the black-clothed man finished speaking, he took out a token and threw it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang caught the token and looked down suspiciously. The token was golden in color, as if it was cast in gold, and on the front of the token, there was a divine dragon pattern engraved on it. On the back there were 3 words, Dragon God Palace. "This is the identity token of our Dragon God Palace, and also a symbol of status. You have to take good care of it," the black-clothed man said. "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded. The black-clothed man smiled. Then can you introduce yourself to me now? Li Bu Er. I have no parents, no family, and a dog is my companion. Qin Feiyang said. No parents. Alone? The black-clothed man looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. Who was he kidding? If he really had no parents and no family, how could he have a half-step undying expert to protect him? Qin Feiyang said. Is there anything else, Island Master? No. The black-clothed man came back to his senses and waved his hand. Then I will take my leave. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he turned and flew down to the valley below. The black-clothed man suddenly asked, Where are you from? Black Rock City, Qin Feiyang said without looking back. Black Rock City, the black-clothed man whispered. Looking at Qin Feiyang's back, a trace of murderous intent flashed in his eyes. There is murderous intent. At the same time, Qin Feiyang's body stiffened slightly. Because of the kill formula, he was quite sensitive to murderous intent. And behind him, there was no one else, only the black-clothed man. This meant that this murderous intent came from the black-clothed man. Get along peacefully. This should just be a delaying tactic. A cold light flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes, and he entered the cave without looking back. He really didn't put the people of the Dragon God Palace in his eyes. But he had to be wary of the Dragon Sovereign and the various ancestral dragons. This was the only thing he was worried about. This time, the dragons and the various ancestral dragons were very likely to come to the Dragon God Palace in person. However, why did the ancestors let him enter the Divine Dragon Palace? And where was the princess of the dragons hiding now? Qin Feiyang stood in the cave with his back against the wall, his hands crossed in front of his chest, and his brows tightly knitted together. To be honest, the threat of the princess of the dragons was no less than that of the Dragon Sovereign and the various ancestral dragons. Because this woman not only had the same ability as the Dragon Sovereign, but also had a clone of the Dragon Sovereign hidden in her body. The most important thing was, this woman didn't do anything now. She only had one mission, which was to find him. If she changed her appearance and mixed in with the crowd, it would be impossible to guard against her. However, there was one thing that was certain. This woman wasn't in the Dragon God Palace now, because those who entered the Dragon God Palace, except for him and the youth, were all dead. If the princess of the dragons really mixed in with the crowd, and also came to the Dragon God Palace, then when Li Changhe and the other two attacked, she would definitely not sit still and wait for death. In other words, currently in the Dragon God Palace, he didn't have to worry about the threat of this woman. I can't be careless, it's better to be careful. Qin Feiyang shook his head and walked out of the cave again. The black-clothed man was already gone. Swish! At that moment, he activated the concealment technique, rose into the sky again, glanced at the island, casually found a direction and flew over. Along the way, he saw many caves and sensed a lot of auras. There was a war god. There was a divine lord. There was also a supreme god. But there was no aura of the nine heavens realm. About half an hour passed. He stopped above a giant mountain and looked down at the top of the mountain. On the top of the mountain, there were 3 middle-aged men drinking and chatting. I really didn't expect that such a fierce person would come to our Dragon God Palace this time. Yeah, he even dared to kill the island lord. This Li Buer is really a scary guy. 2 of them sighed with emotion. Li Buer is scary? No, the real scary person is someone else. Another person took a big gulp of wine, then looked at the other 2 and shook his head. This person was about 1.75 meters tall, thin, with narrow eyes and a gloomy aura. Who is it? When the 2 heard this, they immediately looked at the gloomy middle-aged man suspiciously. Do you still remember the youth lying on the head of the snow python? The gloomy middle-aged man said. Of course I remember. I also heard the deputy lord of the law enforcement palace say that he seems to be the new lord of the law enforcement palace. The 2 said. The gloomy middle-aged man asked. What about the original lord of the law enforcement palace, Long Chong? Yes. Where's Long Chong? The 2 looked at each other, their eyes full of confusion. Long Chong is dead. He was killed by that young man in front of the lord at the entrance square. It's just that there were too many people there at that time. and the first island was a little far from the entrance square, so we didn't see it clearly. Also, the body of the Dragon God Palace Lord was also shattered by that young man. The gloomy middle-aged man said. It turns out that the Lord's body was destroyed by him. That's amazing. The two were shocked. He's not just amazing, he's simply invincible. Do you know how he became the Lord of the Law Enforcement Palace? At that time, he said to our Lord to let him play with the Lord of the Law Enforcement Palace. And the Lord really gave it to him. The gloomy middle-aged man said. That's too exaggerated. The two looked at each other. It's not exaggerated at all. I asked my friend about it. The gloomy middle-aged man said. Is it your friend in the Law Enforcement Palace? The two asked. They even knew who the gloomy middle-aged man's friend was. It seemed that the two were very close to the gloomy middle-aged man. Yes. When the Vice Lord of the Law Enforcement Palace returned, he told them about this. That's why my friend knew about it. The gloomy young man nodded. One dared to kill the island lord, and the other dared to beat up the Lord Palace Lord. These two people are really amazing. I wonder if there are other experts hiding in Li Buer's spatial divine item. Perhaps that young man also has a spatial divine item, and that spatial divine item is probably hiding some even more terrifying existences. The two said in disbelief. A spatial divine item isn't something rare. Even I have one, let alone that young man. As for whether there are even more terrifying existences hiding in there, it's really hard to predict. But I have a hunch that the arrival of those two might cause an unprecedented storm in our Dragon God Palace. The gloomy middle-aged man said worriedly. Qin Feiyang listened for a while, and was about to leave. But when he heard the gloomy middle-aged man say that there was also a spatial divine item, he was slightly stunned. Then he looked at the gloomy middle-aged man again and muttered with a smile. Unlucky child, it's you. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.